Okay.
Welcome, Stefan Marriott. It's I'm so thankful to have the opportunity to talk to you to this little project about Camino de Santiago. Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure, and I really hope that we can spend really nice time chatting about something so special in our lives as such as the Camino de Santiago. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, Guillem, and hopefully I pronounced it correctly this time, your name. And yeah, looking forward to chatting about the Camino because it's a passion for me, as you know, as it is for you.
Yeah. So, Stefan, let's start from the beginning. How 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 you was sorry. What was were you when and how it was your first introduction to the Camino?
Oh, that's a good question because my first Camino was the traditional Camino Frances in 2012, and somebody had actually told me about the Camino Frances and this pilgrimage across Spain about 10 years before then, and it sounded like a great experience. But to be honest, I'd completely forgotten about it, and then sort of roll forward 10 years later to 2012, and unfortunately, I was experiencing quite a bit of change in my life. I was like a lot of people who walk the Camino. I was um, needing change and going through a bit of a crisis as well. I sort of fell out of love with my career working in the City of London in the stockbroking industry. Um, Fed up of working in office and that sort of I'd say 9 to 5, but it was more sort of about sort of 8 to 7 type career job. And also, unfortunately, I was going through a separation and divorce. So a lot of things all suddenly came together in a kind of a crisis for me. And then, I mean, to not try and talk about it too long, because it's quite a long story of how I actually discovered the Camino. Um, I was reminded of the Camino 10 years, basically, 10 years later at that point when I was going for this crisis. And in three kind of messages, really, it sort of all came to me within a month. So I'd quit my job, and I thought the best thing I can do is go traveling. And so I went traveling for about 6 months and had a great experience in South America and backpacking. And I also went to Asia. But when I came back to London, I'd had those nice experiences, but I still didn't feel any happier in myself, or I felt directionless still. The marriage was definitely ended. I didn't want to go back to my old career, but I still didn't know what I wanted to do. But on the plane on the way back to London, I found myself watching a film that many pilgrims know about, and it's The Way. The American in 2012. I saw The Way, and it had come out the year before, so it wasn't so popular then. But I was watching it on, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that's that thing, the Camino in Spain," and that's really interesting. Yeah, I remember thinking about that about 10 years ago. So anyway, I'm back in London, and I didn't have anywhere to stay because my flat was rented out, still rented out, and so some friends put me up in their flat, and I was staying there temporarily in Blackfriars and near Blackfriars in central London. And on a Monday night, I was just on my own. I went out to have a drink again, feeling a bit lonely and sad. It was a winter's night, pouring with rain in London, and I went into this pub, as I say, on a Monday, and nobody else in there apart from the barman. And I don't know what it was about my face, or maybe I looked sad, but I remember drinking a pint of beer, and he came up to me from behind the bar and said, "Do you know what? You should walk the Camino de Santiago." And I'm kind of, that's strange because I've just seen a film about the Camino de Santiago. Anyway, he was a Polish guy, and he went very quickly went on to tell me about his story. But suffice to say, he had quit his job in Krakow in Poland, and wanted to be a filmmaker, and he'd walked the Camino de Santiago, and that had persuaded him or given the confidence to come to London and work in the film industry. So he was now working in this bar, but him and his producer friend he had met in London had just raised £1 million to make an independent film. So there you go. So that story was, really hit my heart, and what an amazing story. So anyway, I thought there was that story. And I think maybe a couple of weeks later, I'd met up with a friend, and I'd kind of forgotten about that story a little bit, the Polish guy and the film The Way. But anyway, my friend wanted to go to a bookshop because he wanted to buy a book for a friend called The Hitchhiker's Way to the Galaxy. And so I went to the bookshop with him, and he was off. So already there's a sign in that name, I think, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And so he went off to find that book. And I love travel books, so I found myself in the travel section of this big bookstore, Waterstones, which is the big bookstores in the UK, so like Barnes and Noble, etc. So I was in Waterstones in the travel section, and I found a book by Paulo Coelho, and it wasn't the famous book, The Alchemist. It was a book he'd written before that, which if anyone knows about the Camino would probably have heard of his book, The Pilgrimage. And I didn't know he'd walked the Camino de Santiago, or even had written a book about his pilgrimage, which actually gave him the confidence to then become a writer. And he wrote, the famous book, The Alchemist. So I was looking at this book called The Pilgrimage, and I just thought, this is crazy. Within the space of about a month and returning to London, I've had these 3 signs about the Camino de Santiago. So anyway, cut a long story short, I wasn't happy. The travels previously hadn't helped me make any choices about what next. My flat was still rented out. So I just packed my bags, and I think within the next 3 or 4 weeks, I was traveling to Spain and finding myself in Saint-Jean-de-Pied-de-Port on my own, about to walk 800 kilometers to Santiago. So that's what got me the pilgrimage, on the Camino, and it reminded me of something which I've been told about 10 years ago. And funny enough, I should say, actually, the pub I was in the Blackfriars area was just around the corner from the Confraternity of St. James, so the British Association of the Camino de Santiago, by chance.
Amazing.
Yeah, so that's my story of how I sort of discovered the Camino, really.
So after that mountain, after when you arrived in San Juan de Piedport, did you remember what you feel? What was like your first big impression of being there and starting to walking and seeing all these pilgrims doing the same? What was your first big impression of the Camino?
Well, it was slightly intimidating.
Yeah.
Not knowing what to expect. I had got myself a guidebook, so I'd kind of flicked through the guidebook and kind of knew the distance and what to expect. And luckily the guidebook said pack light, so I had packed light, so I didn't have too much gear, so that was good. But I guess the first morning I was absolutely exhausted because I wasn't used to sleeping in an albergue, and used to the snoring and sharing a bunk with lots of other people in the dormitory of the albergue. So I was absolutely exhausted, and yes, and just I remember when I went to the pilgrim office and to get the pilgrim passport, and they ask you some questions about why do you want to walk the pilgrimage, the Camino, and and those sort of questions, and and I remember I was very vague. I was just kind of very vague, as just and I think I just kind of, all I could say was that, well, I just know I need to walk it. So it was vague and a bit foggy, and I was pretty tired, but I have to say, then, as soon as you start walking, it's a hard climb up to Roncesvalles on the first day. It's a really tough introduction up the Pyrenees there. But there was just something about leaving Saint Jean de Pied-de-Port, getting onto the open track, and just climbing up into the open air, that you just felt, already within the first few steps, and you realized everybody else is in the same boat. Many people are walking on their own. And I think within a mile or so, I started to feel the energy and the camaraderie of the Camino, and I felt better. Still apprehensive about the journey, the distance, of course, and I've got to do this over how many, a month or so. But yeah, I was apprehensive and tired, but you find your rhythm. You do find your rhythm after a few days, and also you find earplugs as well, which helps.
Definitely. Let me tell you a story about that. That happened to me last year. Last year in August, I walked the Camino San Salvador and then follow on to the Principal. So my first day of vacation was a Saturday. So I work like I told you before, I work in a night shift.
Mhm.
And so I left my job at 6 in the morning,
Okay.
and at 9 I was on the bus getting into Leon. So I was on the bus without any sleeping. So the bus took like 7 hours or 8 hours to arrive to Leon, and I arrived at like 5 o'clock in the morning, in the afternoon or something like that. So I went for knowing a bit of Leon, to the cathedral, some more churches, the old town of Leon. Then I went to the mass. Then I came back to the albergue. We had the pilgrim's blessing, and I went to pick up something for it. It was not like a dinner, just like some cakes and some sodas, just to have something without go to sleep.
No. Yes.
All of
Yeah.
this time without sleeping. Okay, so I
Okay.
I went like in a period of 24 hours without sleeping, and so I was really tired, and I went to sleep around 10:30. Um, and there was lots of, I don't know, 20 pilgrims there, something around that. And suddenly I went to sleep. I slept really. It was fast to get me to sleep. Um, but then at 1:30 in the morning, in the night, I woke up because there were like these three Italian pilgrims just snoring, but a lot, because they were drunk. I've
Oh,
kind of know
yeah. Okay.
they were really drunk that
So
day,
they were snoring very loudly then.
and there were the three of them, and they were like surrounding me in my
Oh
bed,
my word.
So I woke up at 1:40 something, and I didn't get any more sleep.
Oh my word.
I was really tired, but at 6 I didn't get more sleep. At 6 I woke up, I prepared my backpack, and I started
You
the
were.
Camino. It was the first day. I was really tired. But anyway, there are experiences like that in the Camino.
I
Uh,
think it's about it's about it's a different environment, it's a different world. It's about those challenges where you don't have the luxury of your routine or your bed, and it's kind of okay, it's a modern pilgrimage, but these are still the sort of the modern day challenges that you have to go through. Or it's not even a modern day challenge, whether you're walking in medieval times, or you're having to sleep with other people. I mean, modern pilgrims might have slept outside and under the trees and things, but it's dealing with a different an unfamiliar environment, and that takes a while. And I have to say, for me, okay, yes, I would eventually, I was clever enough, or maybe stupid in the first place, not to have earplugs. But when I started using them, that made a difference. So it's learning about to be resourceful in a small way. And but yes, I think I did have sleep deprivation for about 3 days, but then you do find your way, you adapt, you say, okay, well, what is it? What is it I can do? And it's just something as simple as getting earplugs, and then your body, okay, gets adjusted, gets used to sleeping in groups and with other people, and your body eventually will say, enough's enough, I need to sleep.
no, but then it was a good first day. But then
Yes.
there are, on the place that I stayed the next night, in a place called La Jolla on the Camino San Salvador. And fortunately, I have a friend that lives there. Um, so he came to see me. We had
Mhm.
lots of beers there, and we had really a nice time there. And all the thing that was behind, there was left, and it was nice. It was nice. I don't
So you were the ones snoring that night.
know. No, actually, then a few days later, I had uh, the same uh, the same experiences, but this
Mhm.
time there were just three people on this bedroom. It was
Uh,
already on the Primitivo, and it was me, a young girl from Italy, and the middle-aged woman from America, Iana.
okay.
Really a nice woman, but she's not a lot. And it was a really awkward, another awkward experiences, because at some point, um, the girl from Italia, she was trying to make the woman stop snoring with some noises, something that I didn't, something that she tried a lot of things, like by an hour. She was doing this like during an hour, but I at some point I didn't know, was getting me uh, bored and annoyed, just the snoring or the noises that that Shannon girl was doing. But anyway, what I do was something that I tried on that first day, but I couldn't do it. So I went, I pick up my earplugs, like it wasn't this, but something like this one, and I pick up my phone and put it on YouTube, relaxating music to sleep. And after 10 minutes, I was sleeping. That was it. That was it. You know, but I don't know. This I really love these experiences. So let's go ahead. After several Caminos, what the Camino had teaching you, had given to you, that made you come back so often?
Oh gosh, what does it mean to me? Well, I guess it's partly tied in with the fact that the first Camino, you might say, gave me the gift of creativity, and so thereafter, as you know, I wrote a book, a fictional story, which kind of was born from my experience of walking the Camino Frances, and then my character Diego, who's a flamenco guitarist, he um, he ends up on two more Caminos. So I wanted to walk these Caminos to have the experience, to understand, the environment, the places, the journey that my character. I think um, stories come from the Camino, so it was a great way for me to generate stories for my book. So for the first Camino, the Camino Frances in 2012, I didn't plan to write a book after it. That I'd left my work, career, as I say, my marriage had ended, and I didn't know what I was going to do next. But like a lot of people, I just kept a personal a journal, a diary, and as I walked, and but I think there was something about just being out of that office environment, out of London, within nature, and just being open to observation and having awareness. And I think as I start after a few days, when I started to get less anxious, I started to slow down, and the journey didn't overwhelm me. And you meet different groups of friends, as you know, and sometimes I felt very comfortable just to walk on my own for a day or two. And in those days, I would just, my observations, I would take time, at lunch, I'd maybe stay an extra half hour and just write down my observations, like, or my spells, or the environment, or the people I'd met. But that was just in a diary form. And when I arrived in Santiago, I had this diary, and because I didn't have a job to go back to, and my flat was still rented out in London, I went and met some of the Italian friends I'd made on the Camino, and went to Italy. And there I just turned my journal into a blog. I wanted to share the experience of the Camino with other people, so I just started a WordPress blog, and just shared some of my experiences, personal experiences. But then what happened next was that I found somehow it morphed into a fictional story, and I was writing it online in serial form. The first one, which became known as Candyfloss Guitar, and it was about a flamenco guitarist walking the Camino from his village on the Camino Frances itself. But again, like a little bit like you, he lived near the Camino but never really understood it. People walk, and then he found himself on it one day, and so very much his story is influenced a little bit by my experience of the Camino, and obviously I've adapted it. It's but as and the people I meet might be a bit fictional, but all the places are real that he passes through. Some of the albergues are, and obviously the cathedrals and everything else is real because they're on the Camino. But to answer your question, so the second my when he arrives in Santiago, that's just the start of his Camino, really, like it is for a lot of people, like it was for me when I had this sort of creative awakening. So he believes he then finds the faith to be a flamenco guitarist, but he has to he goes to Madrid to live that dream. And so what took me to the Camino Mazarabe and then the Camino Portuguese is his journey, his journey of becoming a flamenco guitarist. And so there's 2 books written now, Candyfloss Guitar on the Camino Frances. The second one is partly on the Camino Frances, Madrid, and then the Camino Mazarabe, which is one of the least well-known Caminos that people know. It sort of starts in the Mediterranean and continues up to Granada, Cordoba, and then onto the Via de la Plata. And so this is his journey. He, without spoiling the books and the stories, he finds himself on these Caminos where he has, where his life evolves as a flamenco guitarist and as he's on his journey. And so that's the reason I really went to the those 2 other Caminos, the Mazarabe and the Camino Portuguese, which I completed in the summer of this year. I did it in 2 parts. We had COVID in the middle, so I wasn't able to complete the first part of when I started that, walking from Porto to Tui. But this year I walked from Tui in the summer to Santiago. So really nice excuse to go back to the Camino and have a reason for it to research the books.
That's amazing. So did you understand more or less what happened on that first Camino that gave you the creativity, the inspiration to write about it?
Not immediately. I think when I was, elated when I arrived in Santiago, and the friends I'd made. I made some really great friends, and so no, just I had my diary notes. It wasn't until maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, when I was with my friends in Italy, when I went to visit them, that my mind started to settle a bit more, and I started to make a little bit sense of the Camino, and I just found myself, as I say, blogging just about the Camino experience in a very personal way, but just a normal blog, and then somehow, sort of, I don't know how to put it. It's a phrase I use now and again, that whilst I wasn't walking, my fingers were still walking, and but in a creative sense. So somehow I think I still can't. There wasn't a moment, but it was just when I started the writing, it was almost as if they were connecting to sort of a creative side that had been that had blossomed and was blossoming on the Camino. And I think that was just being back in nature and being surrounded by, the beauty of the Camino and the beauty of the world and nature. And somehow it kind of ignited creative side in me that perhaps has always been there. And I used to read a lot of books as a child, a lot of fiction books, but I never saw myself as a writer. The only writing I ever used to do was boring financial reports, investment reports when I worked in my old career job, but they were far from being creative. They were sort of, they were investment reports.
You made me thought, of course, like you said before, for many pilgrims, the Camino starts in Santiago, and a few sometimes I in my daily life, I have the struggle of people thinking that I just talk about the Camino and I just leave the Camino. I don't have other things to do and other hobbies or other interests, And
Yes.
sometimes I struggle with that. But 1 month ago, kind of, I was just reading a Facebook report from a friend of mine from Paraguay that she ended walking the Portuguese from Porto a few days before. And she was just writing about the kind of just a report of what happened to her on that Camino. And suddenly I get myself crying and emotional about what I read. And I just decided to write a post on my Facebook about I can't renounce the Camino. the Camino is my life, and although of course I have other interests, other things to do behind or be um, after the Camino or spread about the Camino, but I can't renounce the Camino. The Camino is my life, so if I want to share about the Camino, if I am to talk about the Camino, I will. And it kind of like something like that because although I am on the Camino while I am doing this and chatting with pilgrims and but is this because kind of my friends here and part of my family they don't understand what is the Camino or what some person
No.
feels about the Camino,
Well, I
and you
think
made
it.
me you made me think about that. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, that's okay. Well, I think yeah, and I agree with you to an extent. I mean, the Camino. I mean, the Camino has given me the gift of creativity. I guess what it's given me. I've got my books here just to remind you. So it's given me this book and this book. So in a way, I'm lucky that I can kind of explain to other people how the Camino has affected me because in all authors there's something of them in the books, and of course those books are inspired by my journey, but it's fictional characters, and my lead character is maybe a manifestation of maybe lots of different pilgrims I've met in many ways. So I'm lucky in that sense that it's a way for me to sort of put out there what it means to me, and I can sort of thread into the story sort of the beauty of the Camino. But I think it's a very hard thing. It's a challenging thing to explain to people who've never walked the Camino because it's not a holiday. It's not just a hike. It's
But more than
it's a way of life for a month or however long you walk it. It's and everybody on that Camino is like your brother or sister because they're all going to the same place. They're like school. We're like schools of fish going along the river to the sea. We're all going to the same place, but each fish along that river will have its own. Will end up in the same place, but will have its own experience on the way. It might take a different tributary. Whereas on the Camino you can sometimes take different paths that side paths and side routes, or like on the Camino, the Espiritual on the Camino Portuguese, for example. Or sometimes you might get an injury and your Camino is delayed, just like a fish might be trapped against a rock or something. But we have that thing that we're all going the same way. But I mean, life is like that as well, that we're all striving towards our goals, trying to live a good life. But I think it's very hard to explain, the Camino in many ways, kind of, because it's like a life for a month or however long you walk it until you reach Santiago. It is hard to explain. And, I've traveled quite a lot, and I always find when I return back from travels that I'm very enthusiastic. I want to explain about the latest place I've been to, the culture, the food, the experiences. But even then it's hard for people, to engage in that because, they're living their lives. And, there's that phrase about the Camino, until you're ready,
yeah.
you won't really engage with it. And it was like me, really, as I said, for 10 years, I've forgotten about the Camino, even though somebody had told me about it in a very passionate way. But then when I was ready, it came to me, and I think that's the thing when you tell people, they're just not ready to hear your story. Some people aren't. But of course, there are people out there who are definitely ready to learn more and ready to go on their pilgrimage themselves.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Yes.
So let's get back kind of to more to the Camino physically. So if you right now in this moment
Yes.
you could travel back in time and being able to live one moment while walking your first Camino, which moment you like to choose?
Oh no, that is a tough question because there's so many great experiences. Let me think this. And you're saying on my first Camino, so on the Camino Frances.
Or your first or any Camino that you walk?
Okay. Oh, gosh. I guess it might be has to be some of the earlier days of the Camino Frances, because maybe just that first day actually, because I remember it so clearly, the first day when you walk up, the steep hill or mountains of the Pyrenees, you walk across the seamless border from France into Spain. Then you arrive at the monastery of Roncesvalles, and that is a really tough challenge. I mean, if you're averagely fit, you can walk it, of course. But if you're still averagely fit or more than that, it's a tough, tough climb. But you reach the end of the day. I reached the end of the day, and I was walking it in June 2012. And I remember the reward of a cold beer at the end of walking that first day, just sat there outside of the monastery drinking a cold beer and thinking, and looking, I think, across some of the pine trees, and looking back at the big monastery there. It's a big albergue, isn't it? That runs Savalas, and just thinking, well, I've done it. I'm on my way. I've done the first day, and I think that was an amazing experience just to start, and then knowing there was this adventure all ahead of me still. But I knew I could do it, but it was going to have its challenges on the way.
That's amazing. So for me, let's go back 2 weeks in time, but just 2 weeks, because
okay, you reached one.
2 weeks. Yeah, my latest Camino was just 2 weeks ago. So the first day was on Sunday the 26th, and I started also in Valencia, not in Tui, in Valencia, but it's the same, on the border from Portugal to Spain.
Yes.
So in Tui, I was a friend of mine, Alfonso, waiting for me, just to walk part of the stage with me. So it was pouring rain that day. It was really I struggled a lot with the rain all day, raining all day. Yes. So it was really tough. It was not that cold or whatever, but the rain was.
Well, I can imagine Galicia that time of the year, it's going to be rainy and cold.
It was not that cold, but it was raining a lot.
Okay.
We met in Tui, so we stopped for breakfast. We had breakfast together, and then we started walking. Mm-hmm. After, I don't know, 5-6 kilometers, I realized that I have left my cell phone on the place that we had our breakfast. But we didn't go back. We just go straight ahead. We called to the place. They kept the phone. And then my friend, when he came back, he picked up the phone, and at 9 he went me and give me my phone back again. But because of this, I spent most of all of the stage, all the way from Tui to Redondela without my cell phone. And I don't know why, but I just really, really felt good without being with this one. And
I can relate to that. Yes.
It was different. I was missing something, because I have a strange ritual while on the morning, while starting walking the Camino, because I need to listen to these 2 songs or 3 songs.
Okay.
Well, one of them is Here I Go Again from Whitesnake. One of them. The other 2 are Spanish. The other 2 are Spanish. But it's a ritual. Every time I walk, I need to hear
Here I Go Again on my own.
Exactly. But because of that, I didn't hear them. But I don't know. It was really harsh. I met like 4 or 5 pilgrims that day, but being like free of the phone, or just being there with just receiving messaging on Twitter and something like that, was a really, really, really nice stage. So I really, really like, not because of the rain, but because of the fact that I walked without nothing, basically. I really, really would really appreciated to walk a stage like that again. Was a really, really nice experience. So I really like to go back to that moment right now.
Yes. So well, I think the Camino decided for you that you weren't going to have your mobile phone for a couple of days. It was that was the Camino's gift to you in many ways, to say, okay, well, I'm going to change your routine, and you're going to have to cope with that, and also you're going to be forced to not be distracted by your phone, and have different observations. And I have, because I mean, when I walked the Camino in 2012, I mean, okay, mobile phones were around, but the smartphones weren't around, so you had less distractions with with Facebook and apps and WhatsApp and messaging groups and things. But I did have a phone, but I deliberately, perhaps because I haven't grown up with a mobile phone in the past, as a child, I switched off my mobile phone in Saint Jean, but had it as emergency, as backup, and I didn't turn it back on until I arrived kind of, I don't know, maybe halfway through in approaching Burgos. And so just thinking about it, actually going back to your your previous question, maybe the fact that I didn't have my mobile phone for that length, or use the mobile phone, helped me with my observations, or helped me kind of reconnect a bit more to nature and stories and creativity. I think in many ways that I was more just observant and aware, and I think that probably helped my notes in my diary, and my notes and to be aware. So no, I'm a big fan of trying to not use one's mobile phone, because it's about getting out of what you're used to and out of your comfort zone. And so yes, on the Camino Portuguese, when I walked it in the summer, I had a mobile phone, a smartphone, but I would always turn it off if in the day. So I think that's I think that was a little message the Camino was giving you there. So that's really interesting.
Definitely. So
yeah,
sometimes, and I just about messages that the Camino gets and gives to you. Sometimes I can't, because the Camino and Saint James have given me so much that it's just sometimes I don't know how to explain how this happens to me. One of the things, and I really need to tell you this story. One of the things
Yes.
that happened to me. So I don't know if you know this, but when you get to Santiago and you ask for a Compostela, you can dedicate to the Compostela something that is called a Vicaria Pro. You can dedicate the Compostela to someone that are deceased or that are really sick and can't walk.
I didn't know that. How interesting.
But you can do that. So because I have several, this was my seventh Camino, and I had 5 Compostelas already. So the last 2 I decided to dedicate to someone.
Wow.
And in June, I was in Sevilla meeting some Camino friends, and one of them, Antonio, he told me that he had cancer by that time. So yeah, I decided to walk the Camino for him and in his name, and the Compostela dedicated to him. So I
That's
was
wonderful.
really blessed because this guy Antonio was on when I arrived Santiago, he was there on Plaza del Rey
No
waiting
way.
for me without
Wow.
knowing that I walked the Camino for him and in his name, and the Compostela was dedicated to him. But okay, let's go back a bit.
It's a wonderful
So
story, that.
so this guy is from Sevilla, okay?
Yes.
So I walked the Camino. His name on the first day on the Camino, on that day of the sleep deprivation,
Mhm.
So I started with a pilgrim, a Spanish pilgrim. I started walking with them, but I walked a bit faster than this guy, and so I left the guy behind, and then we met again on the final of on the town that the stage arrived. So I started walking, and after like half an hour, I met 4 pilgrims, and they were 2 couples from Sevilla, and they're just walking the Salvador, nothing more, just the Salvador. So we like chat about like 10 minutes, with usual stuff about the Camino, where are you from? This is your first Camino or not? Stuff like that.
Yes.
Anyway, so I arrived in the town. I met with my friend, my pilgrim friend that lives there. We went there, just go bar by bar, just having some beers. But then my friend needs to go home, so I need to have dinner with someone, or get some dinner. Okay. So I have booked with the pilgrim that I started walking to get dinner together. But this pilgrim was so hurt when he arrived on the final of that stage that he had to go home because he was really hurt by back pain, and he had to left the Camino, but we will come back next year, he told me. So he went to the room. He couldn't walk more. He went to the room really early and stayed there. So I came down to the stairs, and I was just having dinner on my own. And these four pilgrims, they were there, and they invited me. They invited me to have dinner with them. So we were there speaking about. One of my favorite towns in all the world is Sevilla. I really love that town. So we were talking about Sevilla, my passion.
It's a great flamenco town, of course.
We really talked about the town, and
Yes.
I explained my connection to Sevilla, also because of the people that I know that live there, and Antonio was one of them. So I explained the story that I was walking the community's name, and that was it. Next day, I started really early. I started alone, and I arrived on the place where I would stay for the night. So this is in a small town, not town. Now they say pueblo in Spanish. Village, yeah, small, really small. There's no service there. There's just an hostel. They had dinner, but you have to book the dinner really early, and you have the albergue. But even the albergue, there's nothing there. Just albergue and the hostel, and they are really nearby. So the day before, I called to the hostel. I was staying on the albergue. I called to the hostel if I can get dinner, but they all the places booked. So, but I managed to ask them to give me like some sandwich or something for me to have something to eat in the night.
Yes.
So I was arrived there really early. I showered, but then like at 7:30, I went to pick up the sandwich, and these four pilgrims were there. We exchanged contacts and stuff like that, but then realized that because we will do different stages, that probably that will be the last time that we'll see each other. Okay, that was it. Before I finish the story, Antonio, my friend from Sevilla that had cancer, he usually he works on the city hall in Sevilla. So he works on the city hall, you know.
Okay.
And there's like a big nocturne night race in Sevilla called the Sevilla 10. There is kind of a big deal there. And so Antonio, when he just walks with his shirts from the same race. Different shirts saying Sevilla 10. Okay, Sevilla 10 in Spanish. That was it. So let's get back to the second day of the Camino. Let's get back to the Oslo. So we realized that will be the last time that we'll see each other. And one of the guys, disappeared suddenly and came back 5 minutes later and offered me a shirt. Can you imagine what shirt it was?
Does it say Sevilla Diaz?
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
What a connection! Yes. Wow.
There was.
And you walking for the same friend. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Well, I think there are certain things magic things that happen on the Camino, which are hard for a pilgrim to understand or explain. So that makes it quite difficult. When we're talking about how when you're very passionate about the Camino and you explain it to people who think you talk about the Camino all the time and they don't quite understand. Imagine trying explaining these sort of things which are so magic. They're these things happen though, don't they?
Yes, definitely. And for me, there are several things happening to me like that, and I feel so blessed about it. And that was for me was kind of a big deal for me because and arrives in Santiago with that shirt and my friend there waiting for me. That was pure magic. That was
Yeah.
outstanding. That is one of my
And he
beautiful
saw you with
arrivals.
the shirt, yes?
Yeah, and he saw me the shirt, and the first thing that he asked me, "What is this?"
Yes.
What is? It was yeah. It was. What is this? How you have one of these? That was magical, magical.
Wow. It's a nice
Stefan,
story.
we're almost finishing here.
Yes.
But first one last question, and then kind of a small request. So if you could resume, or if there is a word or a sentences, then could describe your Camino. What word, what sentence that would be?
Gosh, you put me on the spot. And as I'm a writer now, I should better come up with something eloquent and creative and I don't know, maybe mysterious. So what would I say? A word or a way to summarize the Camino? Look, I think, what would I say? The Camino, I think, something actually I'd already said, what we were talking about. I would say I think everybody should walk a Camino de Santiago at least once in their life. But don't push it. The moment will happen when it's right for you.
Yeah.
Just like life, when you sometimes push too hard at life or you want something, it can make things harder for you. But the Camino will find you when you're ready.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. So Stefan, now yeah, that we are arriving to finishing here, but one small request. Kind of like the last sentence, but I want to ask you to give us a message about the Camino to the Camino. Whatever you want to say, whatever you feel to say, just a message, just a message for people that will watch this video and will hear this video, pilgrims and people that will be pilgrims, whatever you feel to say, please.
Okay, well, I think just keep the faith, keep the faith with whatever is challenging you in life, whatever struggles you're having or goals that you're trying to reach. Just keep the faith, and if you're struggling, walk a Camino. And it doesn't have to be, the Camino Frances, the traditional one, which is 800 kilometers or so and takes around a month. It could just be a section of that Camino, or starting in Sarria, where you walk just over 100 kilometers and you can get your Compostela. But I think the important thing is that it will take you outside of your comfort zone. It will give you amazing experience, and it will get you outside of your head. It will get you outside of all these things that you're trying to work out, and you will have a spiritual experience. So yes, just keep the faith, and when you're ready, the Camino will help you. I mean, and that's really what my story is about. The Reluctant Pilgrim books. As I say, there's a three parts to it, and I'm working on the third part. It's really a story of faith, and the Camino is a backdrop to believing in that faith, because the Camino strengthens your faith when you walk.
That's amazing, Stefan. I have no words to describe how thankful I am for this moment. Thank you so much. I really really enjoyed and appreciate it. Thank you so much.
No,
And
thank you. Gracias, Buen Camino. It's been a pleasure chatting to you and listening to some of your stories. I really enjoyed your stories, and it's great that you've actually just been there, very recently. Was it last week you arrived? Yeah,
yeah,
that was so amazing. Just you took me back there, and just hearing about some of those experiences, and the weather, of course, at this time of the year. Just to show, but it shows you can walk at any time of the year.
walk any time of the year, definitely. And most of people, I have several friends that walk the French Camino in winter, and they just say that beautiful. That is beautiful walking with the French Camino in winter.
Actually, that's something else I would probably add. That a lot of people always ask me, when should I walk the Camino? And and I say it's a personal preference. Maybe avoid July and August when it's too hot. But I think you can walk at any time of the year, and just walk it when you feel it's right for you, because the weather will present the challenges maybe that you need as well at the time.
So Stefan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. No, thank you.
And